History 1. Jack Grayson was always afraid of death. Growing up in a small town in Montana, he was used to the vast expanses, clean air, and simplicity of life. Here, among the hills and forests, he found solace, thinking that this world would be with him forever. But that was before the day everything changed. Jack had never believed in religious stories about life after death. When the priests talked about heaven and hell, he just waved them off. When you die, you'll just fade away, he thought. But when his car crashed into a truck at full speed on an old highway near the city, and he felt his mind go into darkness, Jack realized that this was the end. He felt no pain, just a strange lightness, as if he had been pulled out of his body and left floating in the air. The first thing he saw after his death was the stairs. She towered before him on a desolate, gray field, as if torn from another world. Clouds were flying among the stars on the empty horizon, and fog was spreading. The stairs went far up, hiding in dense darkness, in which flashes of light flashed from time to time. Jack looked around, hoping to see his body. But there was nothing behind him, no car, no road, not even the sky. Just the sinking grayness and this staircase. Its cold metal railing was covered with rust, and the steps themselves creaked underfoot, although they looked sturdy enough. It was like a dream that felt too real to be an illusion. Jack, accustomed to clear decisions and straight roads, now found himself faced with a choice that could not be explained by logic. Stand here indefinitely or get up. Deciding that there was no point in standing still, he stepped onto the first step. It was hard, but cold, and the sensation sent a shiver through his body. Suddenly he realized that he was completely naked. With every step he took, he climbed higher, but his mind did not calm down. A feeling of anxiety was beating inside him, growing stronger with every step. What awaits him upstairs? What if it's a trap? Montana was far behind him, as was his life. It seemed like he was no longer human, but the memories still haunted him. He recalled his childhood on the ranch, the dusty roads, the smell of pine trees that wafted after the rain. Why exactly did he end up here? Why didn't he go on, and why didn't he see the light and hear anything? He had been told all his life that his soul would fly to the light after death. While he was thinking, a new step appeared under his feet. And so it goes again, again, again. Time has lost its meaning, and the steps have lost their simplicity. Each step became more difficult. The air seemed to thicken, as if at altitude, and with each breath, his lungs were filled not with oxygen, but with something heavy and sticky. But Jack kept walking. It seemed to him that there was something important ahead, beyond the clouds and the darkness, something he needed to see. Hours or days, he no longer knew. A figure finally appeared ahead. She stood motionless like a statue in the middle of the stairs. Jack stopped, his heart pounding. It was a man just like him, but strangely distorted. His face was grotesquely elongated, and his eyes were deep, as if all the life had been drained from them. The man didn't move, just stared ahead, not noticing Jack. "Hey!" Jack shouted, but the sound of his voice was lost in the gray air. He came closer, examining the stranger. He was wearing worn-out clothes that had obviously not seen washing for a long time, and his hands were crooked like an old man's. However, the age was not obvious because the face was lifeless, like a wax figure. There was something frightening about him, as if he wasn't just a person, but part of something bigger, something sinister. Jack tried to reach out to touch his shoulder, but at that moment the figure began to move. She slowly turned her head, and their eyes met. It was a look filled with despair and silent pleading, as if a person was trapped in his own body and could not free himself. "Don't go any further," the stranger whispered. His voice was faint, as if it were coming from a distant shore. But Jack sensed in those words more than just advice. It was an order based on insane fear. The stranger fell silent, but his eyes continued to stare, as if trying to convey something important. Jack backed away, cold sweat trickling down his back. The stranger continued to stand as before, but now his face was distorted. It seemed that it was losing its human appearance. But Jack couldn't stop now. Everything inside him screamed that there was no turning back, that it was necessary to move forward, towards the light, which began to manifest itself in the darkness of an exorbitant height. He walked around the figure, trying not to look into her eyes, and took a step further, to a new level. With every step, there was an unnatural creaking sound underfoot, as if the stairs were beginning to breathe. He looked back. The stranger was still standing in place, motionless, as if frozen in time. The stairs led him higher and higher, and soon he realized that the light ahead was beginning to change. Now it was not the clear light that shone on the horizon, but dim, as if filtered through dirty glasses. The clouds grew denser, enveloping him like gray chains. A rustling sound began to be heard around him, faint, barely discernible, as if the wind was whispering something in his ear. Hours passed, maybe days, and Jack lost track of time. Each step became a test. His feet raced heavily on the cold metal, and his heart beat like a hammer. Sometimes it seemed to him that he could hear voices coming from afar, like the strange rhythm of an invisible world. Suddenly the stairs changed dramatically. She became narrower, and walls appeared around her. A feeling of claustrophobia gripped Jack. Ahead, the stairs led into a dark tunnel, and the railing was chipped, as if it had been scratched by claws or gnawed by teeth. The walls around him began to shrink, leaving him less and less room to move. His footsteps echoed in the void, and this echo seemed to be accompanied by other footsteps. "Don't go any further," the voice came again, but this time not from the man on the stairs, but from somewhere in the darkness. Jack froze. The feeling that someone was watching him became unbearable. He turned around, but behind him there were only steps leading down into the bottomless grayness. Each next step became more difficult. It seemed as if something or someone was pressing on his chest. His soul was drawn to something dark. Ahead, the corridor narrowed into a narrow passage, so narrow that his shoulders almost touched the walls. His fingers slid along the metal railing, and suddenly he felt how sticky they had become. There was blood on them. It couldn't be a mistake. He looked at his hands and saw that his palms were covered with a dark, thick liquid. Cautiously, restraining his fear, he continued to walk forward. And finally, ahead of him, the stairs turned into a strange, open space. It was a circular hall, empty. But there were strange symbols painted on the walls. Jack didn't know what they meant, but he could feel their power, as if they were trying to take his mind away, whispering their insane secrets. There was another figure standing in the center of the hall. She was wearing ragged clothes similar to those worn by the man Jack had met earlier. But it wasn't just a man. His face was completely covered by a hood, and an unbearable chill emanated from him. Jack took a step forward, and the figure turned its head. "Welcome." The voice rang out like a thunderclap. He was full of power, ancient and unnatural. "Did you think you could reach the light?" The figure moved slowly towards him, and Jack realized that it had no legs. She slid across the floor like a shadow. Fear rang in my head. My heart was pounding so loudly that it drowned out everything around me. He wanted to scream, but he couldn't. Everything began to spin, the light flickered, and the stairs disappeared behind him. The figure came close and, bending down, whispered, "You're already dead, and the light you're looking for was never meant for you." Jack backed away, his back pressed against the cold wall of the hall. The figure in front of him, like a shadow, continued to approach, and it seemed as if the darkness itself enveloped her, absorbing the light around her. The creature's words echoed in his head, and each note seemed to tear Jack's mind apart. "You're already dead. The light is not for you." These words stabbed into his mind like daggers. But fear wasn't the only thing that gripped him. Deep inside, at the edge of consciousness, a spark of anger flared up. Jack couldn't just give up. He was still human, despite the whole nightmare. "You can't take me away!" "Stop it!" he shouted, his voice sounding hoarse, as if every word was draining the strength out of him. The figure stopped, its hood lifted, and Jack felt its gaze on him, although there were no eyes visible behind the hood. The entity in front of him was bigger than he could have imagined. It wasn't just the guardian of the stairs. It wasn't just a ghost. She was the embodiment of an ancient force that fed on the fear and despair of souls stuck along the way. "Take it away?" The figure said this with a slight surprise, and something like a grin appeared in her voice. "You've been here a long time. Everything you've seen is just an illusion, Jack. You're walking in circles. Every time you decide to go higher, you come back. Haven't you noticed? The stairs are endless. You'll never get to the light." His gaze darted to the walls. He saw the symbols painted on them again, and realized that he had seen the same symbols before. Jack felt an icy feeling, as if his mind had finally broken down. Was it really all a meaningless circle? All his efforts, all this path that he has overcome, is just an illusion trapped in infinity. The figure moved forward again, but now its movements were slower, more confident. Jack felt the walls of the hall begin to shrink. Space began to shrink around him. The air thickened, became viscous, as if pulling him into a dark void. Panic seized him, and he tried to escape. But where? He rushed to the stairs from where he came. But she was gone. Only smooth walls, without a single exit. He was trapped in this place, in this nightmare, like a fly in a spider's web. The voices began to whisper again. They were everywhere. In the walls, in the air, in his head. "You're part of this world, Jack." Images of his life flashed through his mind. Not from when he was alive, but after. He saw himself climbing those stairs over and over again, meeting the same people, hearing the same words. It was a repetition. An endless repetition. Every time he thought that this was his first step. But it was just another illusion. Jack realized that he had always been here. He was part of this trap, and his soul had long belonged to this place. The figure stopped at arm's length. Her dark outline began to dissolve into thin air, becoming one with the darkness around her. "Accept it, Jack. Accept eternity." Jack froze. His mind was cracking with the realization of the inevitable. He tried to remember his former self, his life. But these images were fading. The ladder he was so eager to climb was not the road to heaven. It was a path to nowhere. And he realized that he was doomed to this circle of eternity, to this endless rise and fall. At some point, everything froze. The space around him disappeared, and a staircase appeared in front of him again. He was standing at the foot of it, just like the first time. In the distance ahead, the light was flickering again, and his feet took the first step by themselves. "This can't be," he whispered, but the words disappeared into the void. There was no fear or anger left inside him, just a cold void accepting its new existence. Jack began to rise again, as if for the first time. Story 2. The Tokyo night, saturated with the scents of street shops, neon lights, and the quiet footsteps of lonely passers-by, has always been special for Sakura Morikawa. She was one of those who loved to wander through the narrow streets of the Shibuya quarter, getting lost among the endless streams of people. In this city, everything seemed to be part of another reality, a parallel life in which everyone is just a reflection of their fears and desires. Sakura was 30. Outwardly, her life seemed quite successful. An office job in the city center, a small apartment overlooking the garden of the Meiji Temple, and her favorite hobby was studying mysticism. She collected old books, amulets shrouded in legends, and loved to sit for hours in small antique shops, looking for something ancient, something that would open the door to another world. And it seemed to her that it was these searches that made her feel special, connected to something more than just the daily hustle and bustle. One day, late at night, she went into a shop that everyone had forgotten, which she had not noticed before on the busy streets of Shibuya. The store was strange, located between two huge buildings, as if it had appeared out of nowhere. The sign at the entrance was covered in dust, and it was barely legible. A mirror store. Sakura was surprised. How could she not have noticed this place earlier? She had never seen it before, although she had passed through it many times. It was dark inside, with only the dim light of a single lamp illuminating shelves covered with antique mirrors and mirrors. For a moment, it seemed to her that they were not just reflecting her, but as if they were looking at her closely, studying her, as if their glass surfaces possessed intelligence. The store's owner, an elderly man in a tattered jacket, emerged from the back of the shop and slowly approached her. His eyes glittered like two black stones in the semi-darkness. "Are you looking for something specific?" "What is it?" he asked with a slight tilt of his head. His voice sounded like it came from the depths of time. Sakura felt a strange excitement, as if she had taken a step in the wrong direction, as if she was attracted to something she shouldn't have touched. But this feeling only spurred her interest. "I study mysticism. Maybe you have something unusual?" She tried to sound confident, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her closely. The old man nodded, as if he understood her without words, and motioned for her to go to the back of the store. There, among the shelves of dust-covered objects, was a large antique mirror, with a dark frame decorated with carved figures of demons. It was almost as tall as Sakura, and seemed too heavy to move. "This mirror is called the Dark Water Mirror," he said, without taking his eyes off her. "Legend has it that it can show not only your reflection, but also the other side, the side that is hidden from the living." Sakura felt a shiver run down her spine. Her mind, fascinated by mystical traditions, could not resist the temptation. "What's on the other side?" "What is it?" she asked curiously, feeling that she was entering dangerous territory. "You'll see if you're ready. But remember, every time you look in this mirror, it takes away a piece of your soul. And sooner or later you will see not your reflection, but what awaits you on the other side." Those words echoed in Sakura's head, but she just smiled. Mysticism always seemed to her to be something fascinating, interesting, but not quite real. She bought a mirror, and a few days later it turned up in her apartment, standing on the wall opposite the window overlooking Tokyo at night. In the evenings, when the neon lights of Shibuya were reflected in its surface, Sakura sometimes stared at her reflection for a long time. It seemed to her that her own face had become somehow strange, as if every day it was becoming more alien, unnatural. She was starting to see something she hadn't noticed before. The light shadows behind her, reflected in the depths of the mirror, seemed to move, but when she turned around, there was no one in the room. One night, after a particularly long day at work, Sakura came home and sat in front of the mirror. The moon was shining dimly. Its light glided through the apartment, casting glare on the floor. Sakura saw her reflection, pale and tired. But this time, something had changed. She noticed that her reflection's eyes were not moving in sync with her own. A strange feeling of anxiety pierced her like a cold blade. Suddenly the lights in the apartment went out. Only a dim reflection of the moon remained on the surface of the mirror. Sakura tensed, but before she could get up, she noticed that her reflection was still moving. It began to slowly approach the glass from the other side, while Sakura herself remained in place. The mirror no longer reflected her. It showed something else, something alien and dangerous. Sakura jumped up, but before she could move away, her own hand, reflected in the mirror, broke free from its surface and grabbed her wrist. The cold touch made her scream. The hand was dragging her inside, into the depths of the darkness that was hidden behind the glass. Her body disappeared behind the mirrored surface, leaving only an empty apartment. The mirror became ordinary again, reflecting an empty space. Когда Сакура открыла глаза, мир вокруг был чужим. Это был не ее маленький уютный уголок Токио, и даже незнакомая ей реальность. Она оказалась в сером, туманном пространстве, где все казалось размытым, неясным, будто кто-то наложил фильтр на само существование. Воздух здесь был густым и холодным, словно она оказалась на глубине старого заброшенного озера. Перед ней стояло то самое зеркало, но с обратной стороны. И вместо ее отражения в его глубине плавали неясные силуэты, как тени давно забытых лиц. Ее сердце забилось быстрее. Сакура обернулась, надеясь увидеть что-то знакомое, но с каждой секундой осознание нарастало. Она больше не в своем мире. Где-то вдалеке раздавались приглушенные шорохи, как будто кто-то или что-то двигалось в густом тумане, невидимом, но осязаемом. Она начала медленно идти вперед, осматриваясь, но каждый шаг был словно сделан в вязкой жидкости. Ее тело сопротивлялось, а сама земля казалась мягкой, податливой, словно поверхность зыбучих песков. Страх начал медленно захватывать ее, когда она услышала странный скрежет. Это был звук, как будто когти скребли по стеклу, издавая резкий пронзительный визг. Сакура замерла, не осмеливаясь дышать. Глядя в сторону звука, она увидела что-то. На расстоянии прямо перед ней появился силуэт. Темная фигура, неясная и смазанная, как отражение на поверхности воды. Фигура медленно двигалась в ее сторону. «Кто ты?» Ее голос дрожал, но все-таки вырывался из горла. Ответа не было. Фигура приближалась все ближе, и по мере ее приближения Сакура начала различать черты. Это было ее собственное лицо. Но глаза этого существа, были совершенно пустыми, черными дырами, которые затягивали в себя все живое. Лицо было искажено в странной, неестественной усмешке, как будто существо издевалось над самой ее попыткой сбежать. Это ты», — раздалось в ее голове. Не слова, а мысли, гулко звучащие в ее разуме. Сакура сделала шаг назад, но ее нога погрузилась в серую землю, как в жидкость. Тьма вокруг начала сгущаться, а перед глазами вновь замелькали странные образы. Казалось, будто весь мир вибрировал, а воздух наполнялся странным шепотом, который постепенно усиливался, пока не превратился в гул. Она узнала эти голоса. Это были ее собственные мысли, но сказанные с чуждым ледяным отзвуком. Голоса обсуждали ее, упрекали, выкрикивали ее ошибки, тайные страхи и желания, которые она скрывала даже от самой себя. Ее зеркальная версия замерла перед ней, наблюдая за ее борьбой. Сакура попыталась освободить ногу, но чем больше она двигалась, тем глубже погружалась в вязкую субстанцию. Теперь тени, которые раньше были лишь отголосками в тумане, начали вырастать вокруг нее, окружая ее, как призраки из ее самых сокровенных кошмаров. Один из них, протянув руку, медленно коснулся ее плеча. Прикосновение было холодным, как лед, но в то же время обжигало, как огонь. От этого касания по ее телу пронеслась волна боли, и ее собственные страхи начали оживать перед ней. Всплыли образы ее мертвых родителей, их искаженные, безжизненные лица смотрели на нее с укором. Она слышала их шепот, как они обсуждали ее жизнь, ее выборы, ее страх перед тем, что она одна, перед тем, что никто не помнит ее. Она закричала, но ее голос утонул в зловещем хоре. «Ты выбрала это!» — снова раздался голос внутри ее головы. «Ты хотела видеть другую сторону, но не была готова к тому, что за ней скрывается». Теперь фигуры начали появляться вокруг нее повсюду. Не только ее отражение, но и другие образы, исказившиеся лица людей, которых она никогда не знала, но которые казались частью ее сознания. Это были души, застрявшие в этом мире, каждое лицо — это бывший человек, который когда-то стоял перед этим самым зеркалом. Теперь они были частью этой сущности, этого мира, из которого нет выхода. Сакура снова дернулась, пытаясь вырваться из этой трясины, но каждый ее рывок делал только хуже. Земля, податливая и вязкая, начинала затягивать ее все глубже, как будто она стала добычей темных сил, управлявших этим местом. Ее отражение, стоящее напротив, наклонило голову и, слегка прищурившись, произнесло: «Ты думала, что можно просто наблюдать за мистикой, не становясь ее частью? Слишком поздно. Теперь ты — одна из нас. Зеркало больше не выпустит тебя». Сакура отчаянно закричала. Ее крик эхом разлетелся по этому чуждому миру, но ответом был только тихий, насмешливый смех ее собственного отражения. Внезапно она почувствовала, как что-то начало отрывать ее от вязкой земли. Но это было не спасение. Ее тянули обратно к зеркалу, как будто неведомая сила затягивала ее обратно в реальный мир. Только на этот раз это была не Сакура, кто выйдет из-за зеркальной поверхности. Она понимала, что что-то другое, злое и чуждое, войдет в ее жизнь, заменив ее навсегда. Последнее, что она увидела, это свое искаженное лицо, поглощенное тьмой. Внезапно Сакура снова очутилась в своей квартире. Зеркало стояло перед ней, как будто ничего не произошло. Токийская ночь все так же мерцала огнями за окном, и улицы Сибуи гудели привычными звуками машин и шагов прохожих. Казалось, что все вернулось на свои места, но что-то было не так. Что-то в комнате изменилось, воздух казался густым, как до грозы, а время словно замедлилось. Сакура стояла перед зеркалом, ее дыхание было сбивчивым, а сердце неистово колотилось. Она оглядела свои руки, свое тело, пытаясь убедиться, что это реальность. На первый взгляд все выглядело нормально, но странное ощущение не покидало ее. Она сделала несколько шагов назад и резко остановилась, когда заметила свое отражение в зеркале. Там, на другой стороне, Сакура видела себя, но ее отражение стояло неподвижно. Ее собственные движения не повторялись зеркалом. Отражение продолжало смотреть на нее, не делая ни малейшего движения, и его глаза были странно пустыми, безжизненными, черными, как глубокие колодцы. Сакура задрожала, не в силах оторвать взгляд. «Это не может быть правдой, это просто сон», — убеждала она себя. Но ее отражение медленно подняло руку и провело пальцами по стеклу с той стороны. Сакура поняла, что это не она. Это был кто-то другой. «Это я», — прошептала она, почти не веря своим словам. Отражение вдруг улыбнулось, но улыбка была странной, жестокой, совершенно не похожей на ее собственную. Сердце Сакуры замерло. Она почувствовала холод, исходящий от зеркала, как будто его поверхность скрывала не просто стекло, а что-то гораздо более зловещее. Отражение сделало шаг вперед, будто собиралось выйти за пределы зеркала. Оно коснулось поверхности с той стороны, и тонкая линия трещины пробежала по стеклу. Внезапно свет в комнате погас, и все погрузилось в густую тьму. Сакура замерла на месте, слыша только свое тяжелое дыхание. В зеркале что-то двигалось, не ее отражение, но нечто темное, похожее на ее собственную тень. Тень начала медленно выбираться из трещин, как густой дым, окутывая все вокруг. Она хотела бежать, но не смогла пошевелиться. Чувство паралича захватило ее, как будто ее тело больше не принадлежало ей. Тень выползала все дальше, заполняя комнату, и вскоре она уже не видела ничего, кроме этого густого, обволакивающего мрака. В воздухе послышался тихий смех, холодный и чуждый, словно сам воздух стал издеваться над ее страхом. Тень обволокла ее, касаясь кожи, проникая под нее, как будто пыталась забрать ее тело, ее душу. В последний момент она почувствовала резкий холод внутри себя. Это было не просто ощущение, это было вторжение. Чужая сущность, темная и злобная, вырвалась из зеркала и поглотила ее изнутри. Когда свет внезапно включился, Сакура уже не стояла перед зеркалом. В комнате все выглядело так же, как и прежде, кроме одного. Отражение в зеркале больше не принадлежало ей. Теперь оно было ее тенью, заключенной по ту сторону стекла, обреченной навсегда оставаться в этом зловещем мире. А существо, которое вышло из зеркала, теперь жило в ее теле. Сакура подошла к зеркалу и взглянула на свое новое отражение. Ее губы растянулись в улыбке, но это была не ее улыбка. Она больше не принадлежала себе. Теперь за нее жила та темная сущность, которая все это время ждала момента, чтобы выбраться. Она обернулась и, чувствуя в себе неведомую силу, вышла из квартиры в ночной Токио. Она чувствовала, как ее новое «я» наслаждается миром, который никогда не был предназначен для него. Ее тело больше не было ее, она стала сосудом для чего-то древнего и злого. И теперь это зло смотрело на мир через ее глаза, готовое охотиться за новыми жертвами, кто когда-либо рискнет взглянуть в зеркало темной воды.